used to describe us in the beginning, to hold us without charge, when they first took us into the Bagram detention facility, when they had stripped off my clothes with a knife, when they had punched and kicked me in the face and the body, when they were shaving off the beards and the hair of myself and all of the other prisoners in an attempt to dehumanize us and to remove the symbols of our Islamic identity, when they spat upon us, when they ripped the Quran into pieces and threw it into the toilet in front of us and urinated upon it, when they brought the dogs to salivate upon us, when they told us that you're never going to see your family again, when they did all of this, they did so in the knowledge that it's okay to do this because these guys are Muslims. And that's what I want you to seriously think about, because CAGE as an organization, there's a reason why I joined it, is because we, as Muslims, we don't believe in the concept of vengeance for its sake. What happened on 9/11 and the reaction of the United States of America was not about justice. It was vengeance. And I'll tell you why it's not about justice. Because 9/11 happened, it was a terrible, terrible thing. But I know exactly how many people were killed. 2,976 people. Every digit, every number matters. When the United States responded with its allies in Operation Enduring Freedom and then the invasion of Iraq that came directly as a result, does anybody know how many people were killed? Can anybody give me a specific single-digit number? Nobody. You know why? Because nobody counts. The dead and those who count the dead, they do not count. They don't matter. 2,976 versus 1 million, 2 million. Who cares? That's why this war was never about justice. It wasn't even about vengeance, because vengeance is somebody does something to you, you do it back to them. The most conservative estimates say that the equivalent of 900 9/11s happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. 900 times the number who died on 9/11 were killed in Iraq and Afghanistan. And what happened to me and people taken to the United States or to Cuba was actually just a byproduct, a nasty byproduct. So let me tell you about something that will just make you think about why we continue. Why do I continue to do this work? Why do I continue to do this work? And it's not all doom and gloom, by the way. I will finish with something that hopefully will lift your spirits. But I'm going to give you the doom and gloom first. There's a prisoner, a Palestinian prisoner, called Zayn al-Abidin. Abu Zubaydah is his nickname. He's stateless. He grew up in Ramallah, throwing stones at the Israeli occupiers. That's how he grew up as a child. He ended up in Afghanistan, and after 9/11, he was captured by the United States of America. And he was sent to a series of secret detention sites around the world. In one of those detention sites, he was waterboarded. That was in a place called Thailand, a secret prison called the Cat's Eye. And when somebody's waterboarded, this is an ancient technique used in the Spanish Inquisition against Muslims and Jews, to see are they still Jews or Muslims, or did they really convert to Christianity, which is what the inquisitors wanted them to do. And what they do when they waterboard you is they tie your hands, they tie your legs, and they tie your head. They put a cloth in your mouth, and then they pour water into your nose. Now just think, get a little glass of water, pour it into your nose, just for 2 seconds. Can you stand it? So imagine that. 16 bottles like this. poured consecutively into your nose. That's called soft torture. In Spanish, it's called tortura del agua, torture of the water. The Bush administration said that this is not torture. They said this is enhanced interrogation techniques. It's legal. You can do this. They did this to Abu Zubaydah 83 times. The other thing they did to Abu Zubaydah is that they took him to a series of secret detention sites in Europe. Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. Each of those countries were used as torture sites to violate and torture Abu Zubaydah. And one of the techniques they used on Abu Zubaydah was this. They stripped him naked and they put him in a coffin while he's alive. Completely naked. And they left him in this box. They made some holes in the top so he can breathe. And sometimes pour in a little bit of water so he can drink water. But he needs to use the bathroom and he can't use the bathroom. And he says, please, can I use the bathroom? And they say, yeah, sure, you can, in your coffin. And he says, but I'm a Muslim and I need to pray. And before I need to pray, I need to wash. They said, you can pray in your coffin. For those of you who are Muslims here, you must understand that you can't do wudu, you can't clean yourself ritually purely, you have no clothes, you can't stand up, you can't do ruku, you can't do sajda, you can't do any of those most basic things. But Abu Zubaydah does his prayer in his coffin, naked. And the other thing about Abu Zubaydah is really interesting. That all the things I'm telling you about his story is that he did a series of self-portraits of torture that were published a couple of years ago in the New York Times. And his story has been made into a best-selling Hollywood film called The Report, and another film, a documentary film called The Forever Prisoner. Abu Zubaydah was forced the governments of Romania, Lithuania, and Poland to compensate him through a decision at the European Court of Human Rights because the CIA had tortured him on the soil of these countries. So he received compensation nearly $500,000. But Abu Zubaydah is still in Guantanamo. No charge, no trial. Can you imagine that? 3 European nations forced to compensate you. The European Court of Human Rights recognizes your status as a victim of persecution and torture by an ally, the United States. Yet you remain in prison, no charge, no trial, that by a country that claims to have in its constitution the notion of innocent until proven guilty. And I'll tell you why Abu Zubaydah is not being released. And just before I do that, one country that refused to accept any former Guantanamo prisoners as refugees or victims of tortures was Austria. It was one of the countries. Many European countries have received former Guantanamo prisoners. I've met with several governments where they've accepted that and have taken the prisoners, but unfortunately Austria was one of the places that said no. The reason why they won't release Abu Zubaydah isn't because of a crime that he's committed. He has been interrogated and questioned by the world's most powerful law enforcement and intelligence agencies, the CIA, the FBI, New York Police Department, you name them, he's been questioned by them. The reason why he's not being released isn't because of what he did, but because of what was done to him. And I want you to remember that name because you're going to come across that name a lot. Abu Zubaydah, Zain al-Abidin, Abu Zubaydah. And I want you to remember that the first person to tell you about him, if you didn't know, was this man here. And I want to tell you also about another individual, because there's a really important part of history that perhaps you don't know. When I was held by the Americans in Bagram detention facility, for 1 month they put me in solitary confinement, and the CIA and the FBI interrogated me. They tied my hands behind my back, they tied my hands to my legs, and they said that if you don't cooperate with us, we will do to you what we did to Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi. Remember that name for a moment. Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi. I didn't know what happened to my wife the night they took me away, but they knew that I feared for my family. So while they're interrogating me, I hear they make me listen to the sounds of a woman screaming next door. And at that time, they bring me pictures of my wife and kids. And they say, where do you think your wife is? Where do you think your kids are? What do you think happened to them? And there's a woman screaming next door.